Good morning, Morai Rabotai, Bruchim Habayim, as we start the second parak of Masechet Succah and Daf Chaf Amud Bet, the bottom of the Amud. Today's Amud is being learned as a Zchut Refuah Shalema for Esther Bracha Bat Chaya, for Rachel Simcha Bat Nahid, Nisim Ben Miriam, should all have full recovery Refuah Shalema Bezat Hashem Amen. Also, we are mindful of people who have been affected with the current fire that is really affected, destroyed many homes and many properties. Many people have been and are being affected by it. Bezat Hashem, everyone should be safe. And
Amen.
Makom Yemalet Chesronam. You know, the Gemara tells us actually that when you have fire in a house, you have fire in a city, one of the messages you take out of it is Kol Bayit Shelo Lomdim Bo Torah Balelot. A house, a community that doesn't have enough learning at night. It's a message, again, this is not something that we use loosely, but nevertheless, getting up in the wee hours of the morning, early hours, and still night, and running to a shiur is perhaps one of the greatest zchuyot that the person could amass for themselves when everyone else is still enjoying the last minutes of a delicious bed and a beautiful pillow, and everyone gets up, pulling themselves out. That mesirut nefesh, when a person does a mitzvah with mesirut nefesh, it's hundreds of folds more valuable than a mitzvah that you do regularly. So Gemara at 5:30, at 6 o'clock a.m. is that much more valuable than a Gemara at 9 a.m. or 9 p.m. for that matter. It's something very important and very precious that we have over here. A great yashakach to all those people who have been involved with the continuous support of the Amud Yomi. And Be'ezrat Hashem, this is going to be an up and up parak speaking about the continuation of some of the laws of the walls of the Sukkah. We have discussed in first parak what constitutes a kosher Sukkah. Now we're going to speak a lot about the halachot of sitting in the Sukkah. When are you patur from Sukkah? When are you hayav? Who is hayav? And what scenarios you have to be using the Sukkah for? Can you sleep 5 minutes outside the Sukkah? Can you eat things that are non-bread? What things could be eaten out of the Sukkah? What activities have to be done in the Sukkah? The proper conduct in the Sukkah, and all of those is going to be in addition with some laws of the walls of the Sukkah in our perek. So says the Mishnah, without further ado, Hayashen tachat hamita besukkah lo yatsa yedei chovato. By the way, I should have brought an email that someone sent. Said, Rabbi, as you start the second parak of Masechet Succah, you have to understand that this has not just changed my life from someone that since high school never had opened the Gemara, had never found a taste of sweetness in the Gemara, but has changed really dozens and dozens of lives around town as people have started actually moving towards a daily learning in different kihilot. It's something very powerful that we may or may not realize that this is happening around us as we develop the sixth Masechta that we have started. Many people have, Baruch Hashem, grown to become attached to the learning of the Gemara, and changes their day, really empowers their day to go through it with chizuk. So says the Mishnah, Hayashen tachat hamita besukkah lo yatsa yedei chovato. A person that sleeps under a bed in the sukkah, well, you are in the sukkah, but you're really not in the sukkah because you're covered by another ohel, another tent, so to speak, inside your sukkah. You're sleeping under a bed. So says the Mishnah, Lo yatsa yedei chovato. You have not fulfilled your obligation. Again, Rabbi Yehuda with another story. This is probably the fourth time we have this in Masechta, that Rabbi Yehuda always brings examples from the stories that happen. Says, well, when we were younger, we would sleep under the sukkah in front of the great Talmidei Chachamim, and they never told us anything. So it must be, says Rabbi Yehuda, that you could sleep under the bed in the sukkah, no problem. Says the Gemara. So says the Mishnah, Shainu yeshanim tachat hamita. We would sleep under the bed in the sukkah, bifnei hazakenim, in front of the zakenim, velo amru lanu davar. They didn't say anything. Amar Rabbi Shimon. Now Rabbi Shimon also here combats this with another story. He says, well, let me tell you my story. Maaseh betavi avdo shel Rabban Gamliel. Tavi, we already know, the famous Eved, slave of Rabban Gamliel, who was a Talmid Chacham. We have learned a lot about him. We had him in Masechet Brachot as well. So, Tavi, the Eved of Rabban Gamliel, shayashen tachat hamita, when the sukkah would be crowded and there wasn't enough room for people, he would go sleep under the bed in the sukkah. So says the Mishnah, Ve'amar lahen Rabban Gamliel lezekenim. Rabban Gamliel said to the zekenim who were with him in the sukkah, he says, reitem tavi avdi. Have you seen my Eved? You know, he was proud of his Eved. He says, look at him. Shu Talmid Chacham, he's a Talmid Chacham. He knows the halachot, right? He knows that avadim and Eved is patur min sukkah. Eved Knaani is chayav to do all of the mitzvot that a woman is chayav to do. So they are absolved from mitzvah aseh shazman grama. Any time-bound positive mitzvah, they are absolved from. So therefore, sukkah, women are chayav to sukkah. No, they're not. So therefore, Eved also is patur from sukkah. Therefore, he is opening room for us by going under the bed, sleeping under the bed, leaving room for people who are actually obligated to sleep in the sukkah. Remember, this is Rabbi Shimon is saying this story, and Rabbi Shimon says, we learned from this. Rabban Gamliel saying, you see, my Eved is a big Talmid Chacham. He knows that he is patur from sukkah, therefore he's going under the bed. What do you see from that? The under the bed counts or doesn't count? Doesn't count for sukkah. So you have a Mishnah that says under the bed is bad. Rabbi Yehuda says, well, I have a story that's good. Rabbi Shimon says, no, I have a story that's bad. Right? That's the Mishnah. Says the Gemara, the obvious question on this, and we discussed this already for those who remember in Daf Yud Amud Bet, and probably another one time or twice since then, that in a sukkah, a ohel that you wanted to have chashivut, it has to be 10 tfachim tall, about this much, for it to take out of the chashivut of sukkah. We discussed that if you have a canopy over your bed, then even if it's not 10 tfachim, because it's made to serve underneath for the area beneath it, then it's going to make your activity pasul. But under the bed is not made for usage, so therefore it has to be an important area. So Gemara right away asks these questions as well. The bed, it's not 10 tfachim tall, so it should be fine. The Gemara says, no, we're talking about a bed that is tall. Talking about like a nice big bed. By the way, this would solve Rabbi Yehuda's problem. If the bed that Rabbi Yehuda was under, right, was less than 10, and that's why Zekenim didn't say anything, so then that would solve the problem as well. But says the Gemara, we're talking about a bed that is pretty big and tall, so underneath it there is 10 tfachim of space, and that would be indeed a problem if you go sleep underneath that bed. Tanan Hata, we learned Echad Chor. Now we're going to bring a Mishnah from Ohalot to discuss a law in halachot of Ohel. Because again, Sukkah is an Ohel. Sleeping under a bed under the Sukkah is also being in a tent. So we're going to refer right away to the halachot of tents, of what is considered a ceiling, what is not considered a ceiling, what is considered being in a different room, in a different area of an Ohel. So says the Mishnah in Ohalot, Perek Gimel Mishnah Zayin, אחד חור שחררו מים, או שרצים, או שאכלתו מלאכת, וכן מטבח אבנים, וכן סוער של קורות מאהיל על הטומאה. What is considered to be an ohel on something that is impure, tameh? Because we know that when you have something that's impure, you have corpse. In the corner of this room, all of us sitting around here in this corner, we will be tameh. Even though that we're not touching the corpse, but we will become tameh because there is a sealing that we share with the tum'ah. So what is the definition of that sealing? The Mishnah says this sealing could be created by pretty much anything, as long as you have the space that's minimum space that's needed for a sealing. Minimum space is 1 tefach and 1 tefach, right? You have 1 tefach and the height of 1 tefach, that's considered the minimum space for tum'ah. Right? That we have had already. So says the Mishnah, this hole, this area, this cavity could be created in any of the following manners. It could be you had some water that washed off a place, an area, and now that the water subsides, you have an area in the ground that's protruding, and underneath it is empty. So that empty space is an ohel. It's like a tent, as long as you have the required area. Or even a hole that was caused in the wall by different creatures. You have, opossums and rats and so on and so forth, and they made a hole in the wall. That hole, if it has this space, still considered a ohel. You have a ground that is made out of very salty dirt, and it caves in, and you have created now an area that's empty beneath. That also is considered an ohel. You have a pile of stones, that 2 of the stones are here, 1 on top of them. There's an empty area between the top one, and that's tefach. On tefach, that's also considered. Any of these given scenarios are considered an ohel, says the Gemara. So says the Gemara over here, Rabbi Yehuda says, Kol ohel she'eno asui bidei adam, eno ohel. A very strong comment. Says Rabbi Yehuda, any ohel, any tent that has not been crafted by a human being is not considered an ohel. Now, this is a very bold comment, because now you go inside a cave that has not been made by a human being. Is that not an ohel? That's not considered a tent. That's not considered a house. It does not bring the tum'ah. Really? We have to qualify this Rabbi Yehuda, and that's exactly what the Gemara immediately gets to work to do. Says the Gemara, my tamad Rabbi Yehuda. What is the reasoning behind this Rabbi Yehuda? So Yalif ohel mi mishkan. Rabbi Yehuda learns this from a gezerah shava, ohel. When 2 words are compared together in the Chumash, we take the halachot of one and apply it to the other one. So gezerah shava. And this is a gezerah shava from the Mishkan. Ktiv hacha. Over here it says, Zot haTorah adam ki amud ba'ohel. By tum'ah it says when a person dies, when you have a corpse inside an ohel, inside a tent, kol haba el ha'ohel, any person that comes to that tent while the corpse is there, and every kli, every vessel that's there, short of samit patil, is going to become tameh. So that's the halachot of tum'ah v'tahara when it comes to ohel. On the other hand, we have another pasuk qualifying what an ohel is by Mishkan. Uchtiv hatam, vayifros et ha'ohel ala mishkan, that Moshe Rabbeinu made a ceiling to the Mishkan, right? The Mishkan was beams of cedar tree covered by gold, that you put it down. We had adanim, at bases, but there's no ceiling to the structure. The ceiling of it is 3 different layers of material that were stretched over the entire body of the Mishkan, right? So literally a tent. And when he spread that first layer, the pasuk says, he spread the ohel on the Mishkan. So even though that the entire Mishkan is called Ohel Moed, really the ohel is a reference to that first layer of the ceiling that was covering the top and the sides of the Mishkan. So on that, the pasuk says, "Vayifrose da ohel." That is called an ohel. Says Rabbi Yehuda, you know what's special about that ohel? It was made by human beings. It was a man-made material that was, no material, a man-made ohel that was spread over the Mishkan. So this is teaching you, says Rabbi Yehuda, that any ohel that is not man-made is not considered an ohel. So if you have a naturally made ohel, it's a problem. Yes?
Any structure that was made with the intention of being an ohel, or any structure that was made that can be used as an ohel? Or it doesn't matter? You understand?
Well, correct.
Meaning a bed is not typically made
for underneath it, but it yes, correct.
So which one does Rabbi Yehuda hold?
Well, for all practical purposes, the second one for now. That when you have an ohel but it's made by a human being, then you could deal with it as an ohel. So says the Gemara. Excuse me. V'Rabbanan ohel riba, and Chachamim who disagree with this, it's not that they don't learn the diuk that Rabbi Yehuda has, but they say ohel riba, that when you have twice ohel in the pasuk, it's coming to add that even those that are not bidei adam still are considered an ohel. Therefore it destroys the drasha of Rabbi Yehuda that's only bidei adam. You have an additional ohel mentioned in the pasuk, and therefore it's going to be marbe. It's going to add even those tents that are naturally made. Take a look at Rashi in the first line. Ohel riba ohalim tuva ktivi beparashat para. In the parasha that speaks about the tum'ah v'tahara, there are many times that the word ohel is mentioned, and therefore we could use them as saying that even ohels that are not crafted by human beings are considered a tent when it comes to halachot of tum'ah v'tahara. Fine. Says the Gemara, V'sava Rabbi Yehuda kol ohel she'eno asui bidei adam eno ohel. You're telling me that Rabbi Yehuda holds any tent that is not made bidei adam is not a tent, is not considered an ohel. Seriously? I will bring you immediately one example that Rabbi Yehuda, he himself says that something that is completely natural as you could have, and no hand of human being has been involved with it ever, and it's still considered an ohel. Now, what the Gemara is going to bring right now is a fascinating topic in Masechet Yoma of how they went about the creation of Efer Paraduma. We know that a person that experiences Tum'at Met, comes in contact with corpse, has a process, and there are other high levels of Tum'ah like that as well, that you need Efer Paraduma, you need Hazza'ayin, sprinkling of the ashes of Paraduma on the 3rd and the 7th day of your process of Tahara. Now, how do you process Paraduma? You have to first have a paraduma. Then you shech it. You have to burn it to ashes, right? That's and then you have special water from a Ma'ayan Yerushalayim Meshiloach, and you will mix it, and then that's how you would have the Mei HaParam. That's how it would have the water that would be sprinkled on people who are Tamemet on the third and the seventh day of their process of Tahara. Now, there was a massive machloket between the Tzdukim and between the Perushim, the Chachamim. Tzdukim, they were people who did not believe in Torah Sheba'al Peh. Now, you have to also differentiate between the Tzdukim and the Karaim, right? Karaim also comes from the language of Kra Pasuk. They also stuck to Torah Shebichtav only, but the difference between the Tzdukim and the Karaites, the Karaim, was the Karaim were very, very, they looked at the Tzdukim were very, very frum, so to speak. They looked at the Chachamim as though they were not frum enough, right? When it says in the Chumash, don't work on Shabbat, and lo t'pa'aru esh bechol moshvotechem beyom HaShabbat, don't have fire, don't light fire. They would sit in a dark, cold house on Shabbat, so no fire. It says, ta'anu et nafshotechem beyom HaKippurim, it says, they would put a rock on their back, climbing up and down the mountain the whole Yom Kippur, wow. Right? Aside from fasting, right? So they looked at us as if we were reform in their eyes. So it was a very dangerous thing. You talk about, Rambam writes, we don't understand the danger of Karaim because we don't have, they are but a few people in Eretz Yisrael. Now they have a small something. Actually, Chacham Ovadia had many writings. I just got the Gilyon Nun of Kovetz Bet Yosef. There are many old teudot that Har Ovadia wrote for Karaites that became frum. They needed teudat zehut of a proper Yehudi, and he advocated on their behalf and so on. So it's pretty nice to see how that this was an issue that was diminishing back 60 years ago. But nevertheless, right now they're diminished to a very small community. In the time of the Rambam, they were so powerful. The Rambam writes, if it wasn't because of me and Rav Sadia Gaon, they would have destroyed the entire Klal Yisrael in the Middle East. That's how powerful they were. And the thing is, because they were much more mahmir in certain areas, the Tzdukim certainly, and this is one of the famous machlokets in Tzdukim and Chachamim. Tzdukim held that the paraduma has to be done by a perfectly tahor person. Perfect. Now, we have learned in Masechet Brachot already the difference between what is called a tevul yom and a regular person that's tahor. Tevul yom means if you have experienced a tumah and you went to mikveh already. You went to mikveh this afternoon and you have to wait until Seta Kochavim and then you become tahor. So in between the time of the mikveh and Seta Kochavim, you're considered a Tvul Yom. Now, a Tvul Yom could eat Maser Sheni, which has Kedusha, but cannot eat Teruma. Right? His process of Tahara is not fully completed yet. Now, a person, a Kohen that's Tvul Yom, can he burn Paraduma? The halacha is yes, he can. The Tzdukim said absolutely not. He's pasul for burning. Now we learned this from a pasuk. It's Torah Sheba'al Peh. They denied the Torah Sheba'al Peh. Therefore, they were machmir. They said, there's all this chachamim. They're not frum. The paraduma is not good enough, right? And chachamim, in order to show that this is because this is the validity of Torah Sheba'al Peh. So it's really the pulse of Torah Sheba'al Peh. They had to do something about it. What they did was, you won't believe what they did. They would bring a perfectly tahor kohen. They would make him tameh. They would have him go to mikveh. Right? And when in that pocket of time when he was Tivul Yom, they would have him burn the paraduma. But Davka, right? Lehotzi miliban shel tzdukim, to show that the tzdukim are not valid, right? You following? Yeah. But this feels a little off, right? Because now people may think that paraduma is not so important, or we're lightheaded when it comes to paraduma. So because they made this kula, which was necessary, leotzi miliban shel tzdukim, to disprove the tzdukim, they went to lengths of irrational chumras that you find nowhere in Kol Torah Kula. If you search the entire Shas, you would never ever find crazy, irrational stringencies that they instituted and implied in other areas of paraduma to offset this one leniency that they had to do to battle and to fight the tzdukim. Right? And this is what we're going to be learning about. Says the Gemara. That's enough of a preface. Now we'll explain the rest of it as we develop it. Says the Gemara, you say that Rabbi Yehuda holds that the ohel that's not man-made, it's not considered an ohel, urminu. It's a problem because the Mishnah says in, this is in Masechet Succah, it's the Mishnah in Parah, Perek Gimel, Mishnah Bet, חצרות היו בנויות בירושלים על גבי הצלע ותחתיהם חלל מפני קבר התהום. Well, I'm going to give another second part preface here. The main chumrah that they did was the person that draws the water from Meshiloach, from this river, to be mixed with the ashes of paraduma, they would make sure that this person never in their life has experienced any tumah. How so? They would create a place that can have, from the time of the creation of the world, could not have been tameh. We'll discuss right now how. And they would bring a pregnant woman, a wife of a Kohen who's pregnant, to give birth in that place. So this baby who was just born cannot have ever become tameh. And they would raise this kid here, not stepping foot out of this place, or the whole community of women, right? Raising baby Kohens, right? And they would then put a massive wooden door horizontally on top of a cow. Now this is an ohel. This is a barrier. If the cow passes by a tum'ah, right, the tum'ah would hit this, because one of the halachot of ohel is, if I have an ohel here, and I have a corpse beneath it, on top of this it will be tahor, right? So long as you have one tefach of space here. If this would be sitting here, then the top it would be tameh. If it would be less than a tefach, still the top would go until shamayim would be tameh. But as long as they have tefach, then on top of, so you had this board sitting on a cow, and this boy would be sitting on this, will go all the way to Meshiloach, to this river, will fill up water with a stone vessel, which cannot become tameh, and will bring it to the Beit HaMikdash to be mixed with Efer HaPara. That's crazy level of chumrah, crazy. Now says, how do you make sure that in this town, this little community that they're making for these wives to come give birth, how do you make sure that this never was a kever? Right? Right now, the highways that have been built here, who knows, maybe in the time of my great-great-great-grandfathers when they were Native Americans, right? Maybe somebody was buried there, I don't know. And if the thing is still kayam, then to the shamayim will be still tameh. You will be building a city over an old bet hakvarot. The whole city is tameh. So how did they make sure? They would find a rock, right? A solid rock. The entire area is a massive rock. And underneath this rock is empty. So there's no way that there was a a kever beneath it, talk about crazy chumrah, right? So even if there would be a kever here, there's an ohel already here, right? There's an oil above it which stops the tumah from penetrating any further, and this top piece is all one massive rock that they would make this community on top of, right? So that's how they built it.
How big is this community?
Small, doesn't have to be a town, right? It's a few houses. It's like a little ghetto, right?
The rock has like one tefach hollowed out.
Correct.
Yeah, underneath it is an empty. So there's nothing of kever tehom, because again, if you have one kever beneath it, and then the whole rock is on top, doesn't make a difference. It penetrates the tumah through the entire rock and upward, right? You only would not have that if you know what's happening beneath. You could never know what's happening beneath tumat tehom. The only way you could be sure is I know this top part is one solid piece of rock, and there is an ohel on the bottom here. So anything beneath that is not a problem because it stops here by the ohel, right? If this is one solid piece of rock, and this is ground, right? This is all attached, and there's an open space over here, so any tumah beneath that area stops here. And this is one piece solid rock, and on top of that would be where the wives of Kohanim would give birth. Irrational, multi-compounded chumrah. You will never ever find this anywhere, right? That's what they did to show that we don't disrespect. We're not kal, we're not lenient. We want, this is a battle with the stukim that they had to fight. Every generation has its battles, and that's what they had. So says the Gemara, Chatzerot hayu pnuyot b'Yerushalayim. They would make this chatzerot in Yerushalayim, al gabe hatzela, on top of this rock, v'tachtehem chalal, and beneath it was empty, mipere kever hatehom, to take care of a potential kever hatehom, which would be beneath that. Umevi nashim ubarot, they would bring pregnant wives of Kohanim, v'yoldot sham, they would give birth there, umagadelot benehem sham, they would raise their children there, for paraduma, for this activity of once in a bunch of years that you needed a paraduma. Umevi'in shvarim ve'al gabe delatot, they would bring cows, on top of it would be a horizontal delet, a wooden piece of board, door, to stop any other potential kever that would be on the way going to this meshloach. V'tinokot yoshvin al gabein, the kids would sit on top of them. V'kosot shel even b'yedeihem, they would have this cups, these vessels of stone that does not accept tumah. Higiu leshiloach, when they would get to this river, they would come down letoch hamayim, inside the water. Umileum, they would fill up this cups of stone. Ve'alu ve'yashvu lahem, they would go back up, sit on the doors, and go back to Yerushalayim. Rabbi Yossi says, no, they would not even come down to the water, because maybe someone was buried there years ago, and that would be a problem also. They would just roll down with the rope, the stones inside the water. They would pull them back up, sitting the entire time on top of this door, and they would go to Yerushalayim, right? The cow had a GPS, it would go right straight to Yerushalayim, to Bet HaMikdash. So says the Gemara, V'tanya Rabbi Yehuda Omer, here is what we need. Rabbi Yehuda says, Lo hayu mevi'in delatot. No, what delatot? They would just sit on the cow. No doors. These kids, these boys, would sit on the cow. El hashvarim ve'hashvarim de'oel sheno asui bidei adam hu, ve'katan Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Lo hayu mevi'in delatot el hashvarim. Rabbi Yehuda says, for reasons that we're just going to see right now, he had actually a problem with the doors. So he says, don't put the door, just the cow. The boy is sitting on a cow. And if the cow passes on a kever, well, the cow itself is an ohel, so tumah does not penetrate upward. The cow itself is an ohel. Last I checked, cows are not made in China. right? And that's a natural oil. And it's a natural oil that Rabbi Yehuda himself says works. Now you told me any oil that's not bidei Adam is not an oil. How did that work exactly, right? He says, no, Rabbi Yehuda agrees with a large oil. What he does not agree with is a small one that's less than a fist. It's just a tefach, not more than that. That's what Rabbi Yehuda disagrees with, which really opens the door now to discuss, two things. Why is it that he differentiates between a small and a large oil, if it's man-made or not? And B, back to our story of the baby Kohanim, why would he be against the door being on top of this cow when you're going to draw this water, which is Be'ezrat Hashem, a topic we will continue tomorrow morning. Hazak Baruch.